Everything ages. You will age, I will age, and racing games do too. And some of these certainly a lot less graceful than others. Now in this video I want to talk about racing games that aged poorly, but I want to just immediately outline that this is not about me like deconstructing old racing games, because yeah, obviously a game from the PlayStation 1 era is not going to age as gracefully as one from the PS3 or PS4 era. Because back in the day, obviously, developers were still trying to figure out what the actual standards and norms are for racing games. How they should play, how they should control, what kind of content they should have. So I'm not actually going to talk about any of that, but focus on other topics instead that I think are a bit more interesting and just highlight various different issues that come with basically racing games in general and how they can change and age over time. And so here we have exhibit number 1. So you might be wondering like, hey, why is Underground 1 in here? Why are you talking about Need for Speed Underground 1? Well, honestly, this game did age pretty well. I think really the main things that didn't really age well too much about this is the difficulty and the rubber band, and also maybe just some of the handling and stuff. It aged fairly well, I would say, all things considered. But as I said earlier, we're not talking about any game mechanics, we're not talking about any gameplay, but we're talking about this. So what you're seeing on screen here is not just the game, but what you're actually seeing is a bonus car in this game. Now, I'm not exactly sure how you unlock this particular one or what you need to do to obtain this one. However, this is one of like various different bonus cars in the game that are dedicated to all of the various bands and musicians that are featured in this game. And one of those bands was Lost Prophets. Which was like I'm not sure for how long they've still been active, but in the early 2000s they were like one of the bigger, more popular rock bands back in the day. And unfortunately they do not make music anymore today. And it's not because they broke up or anything, or just because they stopped, but it's because the lead singer of this band actually turned out to be a quite disgusting human being who did awful things to children and even infants, and in fact just recently was killed in prison. I'm not sure if it's because of the things that he did or because it was of something completely unrelated, but this situation, let's call it that, left a really bad stain on this music band and all of the music they produced together. Now, unfortunately, this is not anything new in cases where there's like a music artist who actually turns out to be a terrible human being. It kind of like changes the way that person's music is perceived going forward. So we see this, for example, with Kanye West. I think it's like a really popular example. And usually when things like this happen, there's always two camps of people. The first one is basically the separating the art from the artist camp. Basically people that believe they can still enjoy the work and the music despite everything that they've done, because the music that they make is separate from the artist, right? Separating the art from the artist. And then the other camp is basically like, this is forever ruined. We can never enjoy this music again. So I'm not sure where I fall in between these. I personally find it kind of difficult in cases where the themes and like dark themes that a musician has brought to, its art, its music, kind of like intertwine with his history. And in the case of, for example, David is like a really recent example. David, the musician, also got into a lot of trouble because of a potential murder case, and a lot of his music has those kinds of elements in there. It's almost like he was trying to foreshadow what he was potentially doing. Now, does the same apply to the song in Need for Speed Underground? I am not sure. I haven't read the lyrics. But even then, I think it's absolutely understandable if you're like, okay, this is now forever ruined for me. Listening to that band's or that person's music has now just forever ruined this for me. And honestly, like, I think when you're playing a racing game, it's kind of also like, you're not really paying attention to the lyrics. It's not like you're sitting down or sitting in a train somewhere and just listening to the music and listening to the lyrics. You know, you're just enjoying the sound of the music, basically. So I think in that sense, it is perfectly fine to still enjoy the music in Underground. I think there were also 2 songs from this band in Forza Horizon 1. However, this car still exists. And I think with this car, no, it's just not something you want to see. It's just not something you want to drive anymore, I think, either. Because at that point, you're obviously like rapping the band and you're rapping the musician, which, you know, as I outlined earlier, is a horrible human being and should honestly just be forgotten about. And so that is why I think Need for Speed Underground has aged poorly, at least in this regard, when it comes to this band and its representation in this game. But let's talk about something a little bit more, a little bit lighter. So this here is Asphalt 8, which I'm not sure why I'm still talking about this game. I'm gonna be quite honest. But this is, I think, like an easy example for pretty much like any mobile game or free-to-play game that aged poorly. It's not because these games like got like worse on a gameplay level, but it's because these games become harder and harder to actually just enjoy and play long term. So what you're seeing here is the launch version of the game, with all of the cars having extremely reasonable prices. In fact, you're gonna see that most of these are obtainable with in-game currency, so there isn't actually any premium currency here that you could top up or anything. Anything is easily obtainable, it's very overseeable, there's no separate currencies, no blueprints, nothing. And here you have the new version of the game, in particular its shop and all the garbage you can buy in this. Yeah, where honestly, like, even just buying the new premium currency is more expensive than most cars were in the original game. I'm not sure if in this video the guy is even gonna like show any of the colors or anything, but basically everything became insanely expensive, and as you can see, there's like all kinds of like currencies now. I think there's like 4 or 5 different ones. I think this might even be like an older version of the game. This isn't even the most up-to-date one. Yeah, this is just like the typical development, the typical devolution, I want to say, for what, you know, a mobile racing game or maybe even a free-to-play racing game is like. It just becomes overly monetized to an absurd degree, and it reaches a point where you can't really even progress properly in the game anymore. You can maybe play like 15 minutes a day before you run out of stamina or whatever. And the fact that the game has changed over time to be more like this, I think is really what makes Asphalt 8, but it's really just a stand-in for many like mobile racing games, age so incredibly badly. Now next I want to highlight yet another Need for Speed game, and once again you might be wondering like, what is this doing here? Isn't Need for Speed Heat one of the Need for Speed games that aged quite good, all things considered? And I would agree. Like I would say in general, out of all the modern Need for Speed games, this was probably the one that aged the best. You know, it had the best reception from the fan base. It, I think, also pretty much sold the best. So I think to that degree, I think this was really like one of the last decent Need for Speed games. However, what you need to pay attention to here, once again, is the car. So this here is, to this day, the only DLC car in the entire game. So this comes with a bit of history. After the release of this DLC, the developer behind Heat and also all the previous Need for Speed games, like the last couple Need for Speed games prior to this, got actually shut down, and the series was then handed to Criterion Games, which kind of makes this their swan song. And I do believe that with this game, Ghost really tried to put their all into it and to just kind of like really encapsulating what people want out of a Need for Speed. And I do think they hit the notes quite well overall. But to me, it was really, really obvious that they wanted to support the game way more, because this is just such a weird DLC to just exist in isolation, because all it does is add one car and a couple of challenges along with it, and that is it. It does not add more than this. It is clearly, or at least it was initially meant to be something in a series of DLCs, right? Like they had this like big like black market, I think it was called, branding going on, and I think they really wanted to just add more cars like this to the game, and maybe like once a month or every couple months, who knows. Along with obviously further supporting the game and maybe expanding the multiplayer a little bit as well, because that one was kind of lacking in this game. So it was really obvious to me that they wanted to do just way more, but EA just pulled the plug on all of it. Like they just pulled the studio from this game, and yeah, that was it. Like, Need for Speed Heat just kind of really died an unceremonious death in a way almost. And it's really a shame looking back on this, thinking how much more this game could have been had it been given the same amount of support that Need for Speed Unbound had gotten. Because I think this is still genuinely the better game between the two, like between Heat and Unbound. I do think I like this one way more. So I think, in my opinion, this is the one that needed the support. This is the one that deserved the support more, I would say. And it's quite a shame to just now look back on not just the game, but also just this DLC, knowing that that's it. You know, like that was all Ghost was still allowed to do. And as I said earlier, it's really clear that they wanted to do way more. The game launched and it didn't really age very well after that point. It just kind of like remained in the same state it launched in for the most part. So yeah, quite unfortunate to look back on, honestly. And honestly, in that same boat, I also would throw in EA Sports WRC, which also died very unceremoniously. I think this one got at least a little bit of support, so they added a whole new season to this game, basically, of the new WRC cars and everything, as well as just 2 standalone DLCs, which are okay. I don't know, I thought they were fine, really. But it was really obviously supposed to be EA's new sports racing game, right? Like, they wanted to just kind of have this right next to F1, and they bought the WRC license off of Calaton specifically for it, only to sell it back to them, I think, a mere year or two later. Like, I don't think this game even survived a full year of support before the before basically this game got cancelled in a way. Or rather, the support for this game got cancelled, and the license then subsequently sold back to Calaton, which... It just makes you wonder, like, was any of that worth it? Like, what was any of this for? So we just got one game that admittedly was okay. I personally just didn't really like it as much as Dirt Rally 2, if I'm being honest. But it had a few things going for it, which they could have really expanded. But that was kind of it. Yeah, there's not much more to say, honestly. And sticking with update support, even in cases where a game does receive decent update support, it might also just be really disappointing overall compared to the previous game. I think the best example for this is Gran Turismo 7. So Gran Turismo 7 actually does get somewhat frequent update support. Like, pretty much every month they are adding new cars to the game and new other stuff. Usually it's mostly smaller stuff, nothing super game changing. But occasionally they do add these like spec updates. So they had a spec 2 update which added a bunch of new features to the game. And then just recently the spec 3 update which added more features to the game, as well as overhauling other stuff. However, I think overall, people were just really disappointed with Gran Turismo 7's update support in general, because it just largely lags behind how much they actually added to Gran Turismo Sport, the previous game. So here you can actually see a graphic directly comparing how much these games deviated from one another. So with Gran Turismo 7, you usually get like anywhere between like 3 to 5 cars, 5 usually only on these like bigger spec updates, but usually it's 3 cars. Like you can see here, May 22, 3 cars, June 3 cars, July 3 cars. Whereas in Gran Turismo Sport, you got like, once again, like another game that got monthly updates, right? It was the same pacing, but here you got 12 cars, 13 cars, 3 in April only, which is kind of interesting, 8 cars in July, 8 cars in August, 9 cars in September. So more than twice, if not 3 times as many cars. Maybe I'm just blind, but to me, the car models in Sport and the car models in 7 are roughly on a very comparable level. At least they're on a level where I would say it doesn't really matter. Like, if there are any like quality differences between the car models in 7 and they do look better, I would say I don't care about it anymore. Like, it's just, it reached a point with Sport where I would say the car models look good enough, and I would rather at this point have more cars with okay or decent details than less cars with absurd details I will never notice and never appreciate more than once. But the same also goes for events. So usually when they add new events in 7, it's like you can see here, 9 events in May, 3 events in June, 6 events in July. Meanwhile in Sport, 10 events in January, 15 events in February, 16 events in March. Same with the tracks as well. Like with tracks, you get them like every 2 to 3 months. They are adding a new track to the game basically. Whereas in Sport, they actually managed to add a new track every month. And it was usually way more interesting ones as well. Like stuff that actually felt like, that actually like further expanded the game. Whereas in 7, if they do add tracks that at least on paper are kind of cool, like for example bringing back Grand Valley, it usually comes with a lot of like weird changes to the point where the track is almost unrecognizable, and it's kind of controversial whether the new version is better or not. And I think most people would have just been universally happy if they just brought back the old track, but just on a new graphical standard, like to a new fidelity standard, basically. And what you can't see here because my camera is hiding it, this comparison only compares 18 months of update support between these two games. And in those 18 months, Gran Turismo Sport managed to add 126 cars compared to GT7, which only got 58, so not even half. Sport added 176 events, whereas in 7 they only added 82, so once again less than half. 9 tracks added to Sport, only 3 added to 7, that's actually just a third this time. And 15 new track layouts to Sport and only 6 to 7. So I think this is, in general, why I would say GT7 kind of aged poorly in a way. Although the game did actually become better over time, I think it just completely managed to just fall flat on the update support overall, and just really disappointed compared to Sport, which managed to just provide so much more content in pretty much the same time frame. And once again, you could say, oh, but they want to put things to a higher quality standards, they want the car models to look better, they want the tracks to look better. And once again, that might be true, but I don't care. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I think everything in Sport looked good enough and fine enough that I was already happy with it. I don't need things to look better. I don't need... In general, I'm not a fan of, like, you know, this trend of just constantly chasing more and more detail and more photorealism when... Honestly, the only time you'll ever really notice and appreciate it is through, like, a random post on Reddit or whatever, where someone points it out to you. At the end of the day, the content is what I engage with, and the more content they add, the better. Now, obviously, there needs to be some kind of, like, quality standard that they need to hold themselves to. But I would have been perfectly fine with Sport at that point. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, 7's update support just kind of felt like a big disappointment for me, at least overall. But what about games that actually did get good update support and are generally liked by the community? So what I want to talk about now is iRacing. And when it comes to iRacing, I think the really big problem is just the cost of it all. It's probably the most expensive racing game out there by a wide margin. So first of all, iRacing is not a game you can just buy and play. This is a subscription, basically. And you can have like various offers here, but generally speaking, over time you will lose 15 bucks per month. This is like pretty much the plan that most people, or at least most sane people have. But if you think that just with this subscription you actually get access to everything, you're actually wrong, because over time they did add a bunch of new cars and new modes and new tracks to this game, which even despite being subscribed, you still have to buy every single piece of added content individually, and they are priced in what I think is the most devious way I've ever seen. So if you just buy into the subscription of iRacing, you only get 19 free cars. This is like a fairly old article. This was written in the beginning of January. So things might have changed since then, but as it stands, 19 cars are just free to you for you to use. But there is like another 100 if you want to get, you know, more content into the game. Same with the tracks, you get 27 tracks for free in the subscription, which I will say that's actually a fairly decent number. But there's a total of 100, like you're missing 99 tracks, basically. And while you can buy some of these cars and tracks in bundles, at the end of the day, like if you just like price these individually, it still gets like insanely expensive. So for example, most cars they added to the game cost $12. That's $12 for one car, by the way, one single car, and $15 for a single track, which is nuts considering, like, once again, Gran Turismo 7, as much shit as I just gave that game, adds this stuff for free. And that game is not a subscription. It's like you buy that game once and you can play it, and everything that they add for free. Like they just add more value to the game for free to make the game more enticing for people to play. Whereas this is a subscription. They get continuous support from these subscriptions, a continuous cash flow, and they're still nickel and diming players to an absurd degree. I've never seen micro or like DLCs this expensive. $12 for one car is insane. In most other racing games, $12 would get you like a bunch, like a pack of cars with maybe like a track thrown in as well. And so if you want to get every single thing in this game, everything that is in this game, if you want to actually have access to all the content that is in iRacing, you're looking at $2,113 and 62 cents. And that is, once again, this was from the beginning of the year. So they have added more stuff since then, and they will continue to add stuff to the game. And that's on top of your subscription model, which you will also lose like way more than $100 on every single year, regardless of what plan you choose. And then also on top of the equipment you need to buy. Because like if you want to play this game properly, you're gonna need a sim wheel. Now, admittedly, you don't need to get like a super expensive one. You can probably buy like a decent Thrustmaster used on eBay for like $100. But that's something you have to also add on top of it. So this game mainly aged really, really poorly just based on how much more expensive it became to even get into this game and to access all the content in it. Because if you were there from the beginning and you just bought these like DLCs as they came out, then you know those $2,000 were stretched over several years, which is a little bit more acceptable. Whereas now, if you want to like get into the game and you want to buy everything, you're gonna be met with a $2,000 paywall that only keeps increasing as time goes on, which I think makes this game age unbelievably badly because it just becomes less and less accessible for players. Okay, but I want to stop molding and just name one more fun example from something that I made. So here we have the Pepega mod for Most Wanted that I made a couple years ago. And yeah, this did not age well. As you can see here, one of the Blacklist members we added to the mod was Riolu, who was exposed for not just being like a really blatant cheater who has basically cheated almost all of his world records across various different Trackmania games, but it was also just quite a scumbag in general. So it certainly crossed our minds at least a couple of times to maybe release one more update for this game where we just kind of like swap out Riolu for someone else. But at the end of the day, we decided that we should probably just not even start with this stuff unless it is like really absolutely necessary. Because the matter of fact is with the Pepega mod, not just this one but also the one for Pro Street, since they do include a lot of references to other people, to other franchises, to other things, these mods are almost designed to age badly. Like they are destined to age badly. In fact, like you can also see the Poggers guy, or the Pog face dude, is also in this mod. Like he's like included in like one like texture in the game, and that guy, same as Riolu, is just an insane scumbag. So we would also have to remove him if we're gonna start with Riolu. And you know, as more things come out and as time goes on, you're gonna run into all of these issues time and time again. And I think you would never actually be able to catch up with all of it. Like if we're all gone from this earth, okay, even after I passed away, there will still be stuff in this game that will continue to age poorly that I will not be able to remove by then because I'm gone. Like that's ultimately like the price for just including so many like different references and for including like different people in these games. The stuff will always age badly with these mods. So we just decided as the team to just kind of like leave things and leave it as a product of its time. But yeah, it's another fun example, I would say. And so these were some examples of racing games that aged poorly. Now, once again, I didn't want to talk about any games that aged badly on a mechanical standpoint or that were just bad in general, because I just don't think there's much interesting things to talk about. But maybe there's something you can come up with that is interesting. Maybe there's something like particular things about a racing game that you've played in the past that you considered to have aged quite poorly. Let me know about it in the comments below. I think it's a really interesting topic because it's like stuff that really no one really talks about. And with that, I'm out for today. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, take care, take it easy. And as always, peace. See you guys.